interesting that the people around both groups were highly knowledgeable about the developments that are taking part in Salisbury, so there was no need to go through which places are being developed. So we had a good conversation, so out of those came three main points. The first one, obviously the priority was affordable housing, and what we discussed was how new developments were needed in the city, but because of the nature of affordable housing, it needs to be in a place where there are jobs, where there is good transport. There's no point putting affordable housing in places that are remote, because by their very nature the people in those affordable housing, they maybe not be able to afford a car, need sort of public transport. So it's just a bit of an eye to developers. We did talk about the fact that we didn't want in the future affordable housing to be in particular sectors. We wanted mixed development, so that it was all mixed in. Well, that would give a much better social mix within developments. And I know we've had some developments in western Wiltshire where that hasn't worked too well. So maybe the developers might begin to learn a lesson that they're much better off if they actually mix their developments up. We also said that within Salisbury, although the figures in GSA show that we seem to have an area where the housing prices are slightly less, that statistic is to do with the housing mix. There are a lot of two-bedroom terrace houses in Salisbury that actually are still more expensive than if you go to other places in Wiltshire. So I think that even makes affordable housing even more interesting. There was an interesting thing that somebody came up with about downsizer housing, and the fact that many people living longer, perhaps living on their own in very big houses, would actually like to downsize, but there isn't a real quality of two-bedroom houses for them to move into if they've been used to sort of a five-bedroom house. So we all felt that there was a trick there for developers who actually could begin to develop good quality two-bedroom housing, allowing people to downsize. And the last one we thought of was there was a high proportion of social housing in the area, much of which was developed in the 50s and 60s. And while it was developed to a particular mix and a particular pattern at the time, which was good, mainly three-bedroom semi-detached houses with gardens, maybe that isn't the right mix now. Maybe society has moved on a bit, and what we should be doing is, on a sort of systematic basis where we can, redeveloping our social housing, almost rebuilding on the same site, but a different mix of properties, things that much more suit our modern way of living. And that were the three things we talked about.
I was on the environment table. We took Maggie's initiative. We looked at water, starting off with that. We discussed whether or not water bots could be provided at a reduced price, maybe to residents within the area. We looked at water meters and discussed whether water meters could. I don't know. I'm not sure about the area whether water meters might be put into all homes. And then we looked at education as well, about water, and discussed whether water education should be kind of compulsory in schools, or whether there's enough being done on water education and things like that in schools. We looked at a whole host of things, really. Trying to narrow it down to three was quite difficult. We looked at waste, because I know that waste within Salisbury has been quite an issue. We ought to go into the alternate weekly collections. I know it's not everybody's favourite cup of tea. And look at waste and recycling. I think somebody suggested on the table that we just have to let the situation become embedded, let it take its time, and people will eventually come around to it. And I think somebody here suggested about compactors for food as well. We looked at packaging. Suggested on the table that no packaging inside lunch boxes and things like that, sort of waste-free lunches. So instead of putting in yogurt pots and putting in penguin bars, I think somebody mentioned, and crisp packets and things like that, send them in without any packaging whatsoever. It can be done. My kids do it, so if I can do it, anybody can, believe me. There was also discussion about green space. Some green space initiatives, looking at those people's orchards was suggested. Currently the project I'm involved in, we're trying to get 20 orchards set up across Wiltshire. and we're looking at green spaces and green initiatives to get that done within Wiltshire, where people can kind of go and, I want to say the word scrum, but it won't be there won't be any cider apples or anything like that, but it will be an edible feast for people just to go and pick the apples off the trees, and also putting growing sites around the town, around the city as well. I don't know if anybody's aware, but there's a place called Todmarden. It's called Incredible Edible Todmarden. Have a look at the website. It's quite a feat, where every single green space around the area is taken up with green. Sorry, I'm losing the word. Taken up with plants and vegetables. People kind of walk along the street and they just pick out. It can be done, and if anybody wants to talk about it afterwards, come and see me. Then there was also talk about play parks for older people as well. I'm not sure about that one. I don't know. It's very important. There we go. But I think the Tai Chi was mentioned in walks, things like that. There's also the BTCV and Green Gyms initiative. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that as well. It's a brilliant initiative, and I think we can maybe incorporate something like that in Salisbury too. And the last finally was pavements. We kind of obviously there's a lot of crossover with pavements between ourselves and transport and a lot of the other tables around the room. But it was kind of the way we looked at it was linked to the health group, and that was basically all we